Proportion as a principle of design. In our past lessons, we had an in-depth discussion about the elements of art. The elements of art are the building blocks of artwork. On the other hand, the principles of design are the techniques on how the artist uses the elements of art in their art piece. Lesson objectives. What is the difference between proportion and scale? Observe the following pictures. One of the important principles of design is proportion. It is the relation of the size, amount, or the number of an individual part in comparison to the whole image. Often proportion is mistaken for scaling because of their relative definition. The scale is the size of an object relative to another object in an artwork. The whole, as defined in proportion and scaling, can refer to a single object like a face or the entire artwork like a landscape. Importance of proportion in drawing. Proportion means making sure the sizes of things in your picture look right compared to each other. It helps your drawing feel real and balanced. Imagine you're drawing a tree and a person. The tree should look bigger than the person, and the person's arms and legs should look the right length. No super long arms or tiny feet, unless you're trying to be funny or creative. Artists sometimes change proportions on purpose, like in cartoons or cubism, to show a special feeling or style. But if you want your drawing to look realistic, it's best to observe carefully and match the real sizes you see. In Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, ca. 1490, you will identify da Vinci's representation of ideal human body proportions. For the facial proportions when drawing the head, there are a lot of artists with their methods. Andrew Loomis and Frank Riley are the two popular artists in this field. Their methods of drawing the head are the basis of some modern artists when drawing. There are different techniques on how to improve your accuracy in drawing. These techniques can't promise you to improve immediately, but keep in mind that drawing is a skill that anyone can master if you put work on it. Sighting, measuring technique. This is the most common technique to measure the proportion of your subject. You can use any comfortable tool, but a pencil works well. Use this to measure angles, gauge relative size, and determine how different features line up on your subject and transfer these measurements on your drawing surface. 1. Begin by marking your position from your subject. Make sure that you are seated or standing in a comfortable position, since it may take some time to get all measurements on your drawing surface. Keep everything constant or suffer uneven proportions. 2. Hold your pencil and extend your arm completely without bending the elbow. Bring your line of sight to your shoulder and close one eye. 3. Use the end of the pencil or the tip and line it up to the highest or widest point in your subject. It depends on your preference. Use your thumb to mark the bottom measurement. 4. Transfer the marks on your drawing surface. Block in all the markings to get the horizontal and vertical measurements of your subject. 5. Once you are done with measuring the first element of the subject, the rest is easy. Just follow the steps repeatedly until you are done with the measurement. Always keep in mind the other object should be properly proportional to the first object you measured. This way you will be assured that your markings are accurate. 6. Connect your markings to show the visible image of your subject. In case some portions are angled, don't worry about its actual measurement. Measure it with your pencil and mark whatever you had observed and transfer it on your drawing surface. In our previous lesson about proportion, we have discussed the most common method artists use when measuring proportion, the sighting method. Today's lesson is the continuation of our dive within the world of proportion, its types and other methods you can use to produce accurate and realistic output. Lesson objectives. Types of proportion. Proportion, as we had discussed, is the relation of size, amount, or the number of an individual part in comparison to the whole composition. Proportions can be standard, altered, or scaled. Standard proportion refers to the suitable height, width, and depth compared to the figure or object's surrounding, foreground or background. Altered proportion. These are artworks where the proportions are improved or transformed. Although the human body is considered the most standard reference of proportion, some artist purposely alters their designs to emphasize their idea. As stated by Francis Bacon in his essay of beauty, there is no excellent beauty that hath not some strangeness in the proportion. There are two ways to alter proportion: monumental and miniature method. In monumental method, the artwork is larger than life size or actual appearance, while miniature artworks are smaller than their natural size. Scaling proportion. This can be realistic and unrealistic scale. This is the relativity of the size of a figure or object to the other elements in the whole composition. Realistic scale is achieved when the relation of figures or objects in the composition resembles real-life scaling. Unrealistic scales, on the other hand, is observed when the size of the composition's elements doesn't resemble its actual scaling in real life. Grid technique. This drawing technique is an easy approach of breaking down your subject into smaller pieces of visual information. This technique, like the sighting method, helps promote proportional accuracy in an illustration. This is also an effective and easy way of scaling up, down, or reproduce an image. To simplify, grid technique is a method of drawing or placing a grid over your reference image. These grids are of equal ratio to the grids in your drawing surface. This technique is best suited for image photo reference. One. Place a grid over your reference image or photo. You can do this by drawing lines with precise measurements. It depends on your preference as to how many grids you'd like to use. You can follow the actual measurements of your reference or scale it up to proportionate size. Remember that the size of artwork must always be in proportion to the size of the reference photo. 2. Place a grid over your drawing surface with the same dimensions on your reference image. To take it simply, if you placed a 5x5 grid on your reference image, then place a 5x5 grid on your drawing surface. You can scale it up by using higher units of measurement if you are drawing on a larger surface like a canvas. Remember to make your grids accurately. The entire artwork will depend on how well you measured each grid. You can use a pencil to create grids or any medium if it will not affect your finished output. 3. Transfer what you see in the reference image. There is no actual rule on where you should start transferring information from reference to drawing surface. The important thing is to copy each reference element block by block to place initial drawing lines and marks to complete the illustration. For today's lesson, we will indulge in another proportion method and some techniques on how to achieve good proportions. Lesson objectives. Triangular grid method, or much better termed as Van Gogh's perspective frame. In his letter to his brother Theo van Gogh in August 1882, Van Gogh expressed his delight in owning his first perspective frame. The most fascinating thing in his letters is how he enthusiastically explained and illustrated his perspective tool, and even drew himself using it in the dunes at Scheveningen. The triangular grid method is used the same way as the regular grid method, but instead of using squares to divide the subject into small pieces, we use triangles. The advantage of using this method is that you use lesser lines or grids on the reference and the drawing surface but requires more skills from the artist. 1. Start with your reference image, protecting it over if needed. You can cover it with a clear sheet to draw grids on, without damaging the reference image. 2. Draw diagonal lines from the upper corner to the lower corner of your reference image. If your reference image is not a perfect square or rectangle, draw a square or rectangle around it so you'll have an idea where to begin your diagonal grids. 3. Draw horizontal and vertical lines to finally divide the reference into quarters and all your lines intersect at the center. 4. Do the same grids in your drawing surface. Like the traditional grid method, you can also scale up or down your transfer grids depending on your preference. 5. Start transferring the details from the reference image to your drawing surface. You can do it manually or by using a compass or a proportional divider. Remember that the end of the compass or a proportional divider is positioned at the center of the grid, then mark all necessary details crossing the grid lines. 6. Connect all markings you made and apply details to give volume and depth to your illustration. For life illustrations, you can devise a viewfinder like Van Gogh's perspective frame or an exact replica of it for larger scale illustration on canvas. Instead of using a compass, you must study and transfer the life details in your drawing surface. We've finally reached our final lesson in proportional illustration. The previous lessons were kind of tough, but I'm very thankful that you have followed along with the most important principle that should always be present in your illustrations, the proportion. In this final lesson, we will go over some of the proportional drawing techniques that may prove helpful in capturing accurate proportions. Lesson objective: breaking down objects into basic shapes. We've already discussed this proportional technique during our first quarter. If you could remember, complex reference can be simplified into basic shapes that are easier to draw. Basically, this technique is used by artists to focus on the framework of the reference rather than being distracted by details. This way you can make sure that there is accuracy in your illustrations. Unlike the other 3 methods we discussed in this lesson series, drawing from basic shapes requires a lot of artist technique, experience and observational skills, rather than just copying details via comparative method or grids. Observing negative space. This technique, like the proportional drawing through basic shapes, requires more of the artist's skills. Instead of looking at your subject, this technique requires you to look at the space behind the reference, then make out the shapes that block out the subject. Drawing in perspective. This drawing technique is used by the artist to create an illusion of space. In this technique, your basis for accuracy depends on the number and location of your vanishing point. Although this is a great technique to draw an object in space, this technique is commonly used for architectural designs, e.g. establishment layouts, house design, building, etc. Perspective drawing can be categorized according to the number of vanishing points: 1-point perspective, 2-point perspective, and 3-point perspective. We will discuss more perspective drawings as we progress in our modules. 1. Draw a horizon line, or the line that will represent the farthest eye level of the scene. 2. Place a vanishing point in your horizon line. It is the point where an object appears to be radiating in or getting smaller in the distance. 3. Draw the front face of the perspective cube. 4. Using a light line, draw the lines in the corner of the cube, connection to the vanishing point. 5. Complete the cube details, completing your very first perspective drawing. 6. Clean up your illustration. Remove unnecessary construction lines. Gesture drawing. This drawing method can improve proportional accuracy through the utilization of quick and loose dynamic lines or shapes. It is used to get your subject's form and movement. Gesture drawing omits intricate details to focus on what you are seeing as you are seeing it. Often, this technique can be rough with quick and deliberate marks. To some, it is a form of expression and freedom. This is not about creating a final drawing, but rather as a study of your subject's form, movement and expression. We will discuss more gesture drawing procedures on our human figure lessons.